Hello, boys and girls. Today we are going to talk about the immigration during the 1920s. I am Sarah Nicholas with my co-host Tyra Nick and a cameo appearance by Jasmine White. We welcome you to Wanabet. We are going to explain fascinating moments of history. Today we will be diving into the history about the immigration during the 1920s. Today, the topic we are going to talk about is how the Immigration Act of 1920 limited the number of immigrants allowed entry into the United States through the National Origins Quota. The quota provided immigration visas to 2% of the total number of people of each nationality in the United States. As of the 1890 national census, it completely excluded immigrants from Asia. What led immigration during the 1920s and how did it impact as we know it? Well, let's find out. To understand the immigrants, we first need to go back to 1921 and 1924. The United States enacted restrictive immigration laws establishing for the first time in the country's history national origins quotas for immigration to the U.S. The Immigration Act of 1924 set up a simple formula: the number of immigrants of a given nationality each year could not exceed 2% of the number of people of that nationality living in the United States in the 1890s. Living in the United States is better because there were over 1 million immigrants that entered the country purely on the basis of work, since labor opportunities and working conditions were so poor in the majority of other countries. In the 1920s, the Johnson-Reed Act was crucial because during the 18 and early 1900s, millions of people immigrated to the United States. During the 1920s, immigration trends in the United States changed in two ways. First, the number leveled out and fell dramatically. Fewer than 700,000 people arrived during the following decade. Second, the Europeans continued to constitute most of new arrivals. The most common place of origin shifted from southern and eastern to western Europe. This happened because World War I caused so much devastation in western and central Europe that people fled to the United States. This is important because these people who had different languages and cultures that strayed from the people who had came from the United States over the prior 500 years, namely Catholic and non-white. This led to tension in overcrowded and corrupt cities. Immigrants created their own sections of many major cities that still exist today. This led to culture-based gangs and organized crime that carried on old rivalries from the old world. Eugenics was rooted in the social Darwinism that process that species can change over time, that new species come from pre-existing species in the late 19th century, a period in which nations witnessed competition and biological realization of inequality were popular. Other events such as World War I, the Russian Revolution, and the Red Scare strengthened the nativist position and affected congressional legislation.
The approval process moved from United States ports of entry to offices in the places of departure where hopeful immigrants applied for visas. The 1924 changes contributed to the closure of Ellis Island in New York City, which had once been the largest immigrant processing station in the nation. The passage of the Emergency Act of 1921 and the National Act of 1924, which limited the number and nationality of immigrants allowed into the United States, effectively ended the era of mass immigration into New York.
The smaller numbers of immigrants began to process on the arrival ships, with Ellis Island serving the primary detainment center. Soldiers returned home looking for jobs, just as a fresh surge of job-seeking immigrants also arrived. Among some, an ethnic pro-choice fueled nativist feeling. Nativism is English-speaking immigrants and native-born Americans reacted to the growing cultural diversity with growing racism and suspicion. Some Angelos embraced nativism, which valued Americans with roots in the United States. Over more recent immigrants, nativists promoted a sense of fear over a preserved origin search. The cultural changes were the presence of large numbers of talented immigrants. The high-tech industries have pushed American institutions to based on skills rather than money.
Researchers have found that U.S. immigration restrictions in the 1920s reduced growth and increased reliance on mechanization. They also found that immigrant group accused assimilate fastest and that immigrants improves the economy.
The congressional legislation restricts immigration in addition to two subsequent laws. The Emergency Quota Act of 1920 and the National Origin Act of 1924 established a quota system to govern immigration from specific countries. What do you think would happen if immigrants had taken place? History would look very different today. The transformations that happened during 4 peak periods of significant immigration, westward expansion, and the shift to an agriculture economy in which 19th century would not have occurred. The immigrants arrived sharply different from their counterparts of 50 years ago, but also in their education level of well-being, drastically affecting American culture with new language, cuisines, and holidays.
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to Wanna Bet for more deep dives into history. Feel free to share your thoughts with us. Signing off. Thank you for listening to our podcast, Wanna Bet, and our names are Sarah, Tyra, and Jasmine White. Please subscribe to our channel, Wanna Bet.